Hi, I'm Trisha Wolfrey, and welcome to my podcast, How to Manage Stress. Today, I'm in conversation with inner connection coach Lizzie Kurtzer, where we're going to learn about the cycles that we get into in our lives and also in our being that we need to really be paying more mindful attention to in order to manage our stress. This is something that's suitable for both men and women, and we will also be exploring the myths about masculine and feminine energy, how we all need both of them. So I'm really excited about this. It's a super interesting subject which can really help every single person. So I hope you enjoy it too. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask Lizzie what it is that stresses her out on a day-to-day basis. Morning, Lizzie.
Good morning, Trisha. Lovely to be here.
So what is it that stresses you out on a day-to-day basis?
Well, at the moment, my daily stress is we've recently moved and like dealing with the setting up of utilities, it is just driving me insane.
I'm laughing, but it's the laughter of pain, recognition, pain recognition.
And it should be a one-off quick thing, shouldn't it? But I can tell you, we moved nearly 3.5 months ago, and I'm still dealing with setting up utilities. So that is at the moment my total frustration, and it stresses me out, and I have to remind myself that this is okay. It's frustrating, but it's okay.
It's normal to be frustrated. I think sometimes some things that shouldn't be difficult are, and I think the frustration of that is what people find stressful. And I think that's just something to really be kind with yourself through, and maybe take lots of breathers. So your way of, sorry, I'm saying what I would do. What do you do in moments like that?
I mean, always coming back to the breath is a big thing for me, taking those deep breaths, kind of making sure I'm aware of where I'm holding the tension in my body to relax myself. And I think that really helps me to kind of bring in a bit of perspective and just think about, okay, what do I need to do? And I will have some times where days I've gone, do you know what? I'm just not going to deal with this right now. I'm going to choose a day that I know that I'm going to be a little bit more resilient and have a bit more time, rather than force it where I know I'm busy, I've got a lot on, and then I'm going to try and deal with it right now. So that they would be the two things. Does it need to happen right now? Can I choose a different time? And equally just that relaxing to bring myself into a bit of perspective.
Brilliant. I love that. And I guess that part of that answer links a little bit into what we're going to be talking about, doesn't it though? So shall we begin? I'm going to have to look at my notes because I had a good first question and I can't remember what it is. That's my stress this morning. What was it now? What are the various cycles of life and being that we need to be mindful about?
So I'm introducing to everyone today that we are, or reminding everyone that we are cyclical beings, and we can live in a bit of a linear world and forget that we are cyclical. And so on Saturday it was the equinox, and in the UK we just moved into autumn, the season of autumn. So the outer seasons are one of the cycles that we can really draw on. The obvious one that we all know that we live within and that impact us. So, summer, autumn, winter, spring. Then we have, if you're a woman, you have your life cycle men and women all have life cycles. And then if you're a woman, you have your menstrual cycle. And within your menstrual cycle, you have the menopause cycle. And these cycles really impact us on a daily basis that we sort of forget. We try to be the same every day, and we forget that we're not cyclical beings. And then we have the daily cycle that change, that we're part of. There's the moon cycle. These are all connected and related and sort of moving with each other, and that we can draw on to manage our way of being with ourselves and a way of connecting with ourselves and the world.
So you made lots of really good points there, so I'm scribbling them down because I'd like to cover them off. So I didn't know it was the equinox, and I realized what I've been thinking in my mind is that I'm waiting for the clocks to go back. That is not the same thing at all, is it? That's to do with So what is the impact of the equinox on our stress and our energy, if any?
Yeah, so people might have noticed. So what are we today? The 25th of September. This, like, over the past week, I've had a lot of people say to me kind of along the lines of, I feel a bit melancholy. I feel a bit iffy, and the season of autumn, everything's slowing down, the days are getting shorter, we've kind of got over that hype of summer holidays, being out, sociable. Yeah, that one day about 3 weeks ago. And we might be noticing just in ourselves a bit of a pullback, a slowing down. As I mentioned, that word melancholy, and that might mean different things for different people, but there's just a return inwards. And then, you think about like how it impacts on a daily basis. Like, we're rugging up a little bit more. We're thinking about cooking. Roasts are back. The word roast I've heard so many times in the past week. People.
I've one yesterday.
Yeah. So it changes our behaviors that that maybe. I don't know if we were all doing barbecues this summer, but it slightly changes. What we wear, what we eat, our social habits, but then equally our connection to ourselves as well.
Yeah. So the connection to ourselves. So is that the cozying up bit? That's the withdrawing bit, from ourselves bit. So is that like a form of hibernation as we prepare for the winter, or is it something else?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Like, if you think about in winter, we are a bit more stiller and slowing down, and we're inside more. And equally, like, if you think about nature's doing the same thing. They prepare, autumn is a time of harvest, in that respect, preparing for the winter, for the famine, once, before we had modern lives, that would be part of that behavior. And so we're preparing for that pause. And yes, we don't pause like we used to, but winter, and over in the UK, in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the end of the year. So we're everything's like we're drawing to a close, everything's sort of contracting.
And is that important for our stress management as well, to be kind of going more inwards?
Absolutely. And this is, we live in this world of constant doing and constant going, and this pressure that we, some people say we put on ourselves, but it's a bit of a societal, systemic thing. Just go, productivity, doing. But we need to, contract and come back to ourselves. We need to reflect what's working, what's not working. And then, like winter teaches us, winter, everything goes underground, the trees are bare, the animals go into hibernation, but there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening deep in the earth so that spring can come, so there's a lot of restoration and rejuvenation that happens in winter, and the autumn prepares for that. It's a transitional phase. And so we do, we can lean on that to learn about ourselves. Absolutely. We need to come inwards, slow down, reflect. Yeah.
So just as the nature goes deep into the earth, we need to go deep into ourselves to fully benefit from that cycle of the seasons.
Absolutely.
So then we have winter, and that just takes us further, or is there something more to it?
I would say winter is a phase of of stillness, of restoration. When I talk about it in a cyclical sense, or if I brought in the menstrual cycle, and we liken winter to your period, to your bleed, it's a time of intuition. When everything's still and quiet, we can really hear ourselves. Which again brings in that layer of why we need to slow down. We need to incorporate rest, because if we don't, how can we hear ourselves? How do we hear our voice? How do we, that's so linked with our boundaries and our visioning for what we want in the future. And So that's where we bring in, you know, the winter and the stillness and the quiet.
Yeah. What is that word? I've forgotten what it is. Hygge. Is it Hygge or Hugger or something? Or Hygge?
Oh yeah,
I don't know how to say it.
Yeah,
Hygge. And that's all about kind of really supporting that cycle of the year, isn't it?
And that transition into it. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Yeah. And so then we get to spring. What is it that we need to do about, how does that we manage our stress and energy with spring?
So if you think about spring, you know, spring, the days are getting lighter again. So we've just gone from winter. So we've gone from autumn, where the days are getting shorter and we're slowing down and contracting, to winter, where there isn't as much sunlight, stillness. And then all of a sudden, I always start with the light. You know, the days are starting to get brighter, and we start to see new shoots coming through, and it's a new beginning. You know, it's new life. You know, that you see the lambs and all the babies in the animal kingdom coming out, and there's just this freshness, and it brings real optimism. And you know, we all know that feeling after a long winter of those early spring days.
Yeah.
You know, and it reminds us that you know, the winter will end. that darkness will end.
Yeah.
And that new beginnings are there, and it brings in those feelings of, you know, hope, optimism, planning, you know, spring cleaning and getting ready for that new cycle and new year. We think about, you know, we make plans, and so we can, yeah, again really draw on that. You know, spring is that new beginning, is linked to that life cycle as well. If we bring in the life cycles of 0 to 25, and we think about those building years as a child, when we're born and we build, we're building, we're growing, we're learning. And within that, there is innocence, risk-taking, arrogance, optimism, like just pure optimism as a child, where it's not
arrogance. So we're kind of going into the ages, which I'd like to do a little bit more, but the arrogance here is not the arrogance of I'm better than anybody else, but it's arrogance of ignorance, of innocence, sorry.
Oh yeah.
It's the innocence, you know, I know it all because I don't know it all. Does that make 100%. Sense?
Yeah, exactly. I can do anything. I you know, because I don't know anything. Yeah, exactly. And we need that, you know, we need that energy in our life. So
let's come back to that, because I think that's a whole, you know, maybe we end up on that one, because I think it's such an interesting way of looking at our years, you know, our ages and so on. So then we have the summer.
Well, you know, summer is like full bloom, isn't it? Yeah, that one day, one day scattered in the UK, but everything's so green, you know, that everything is in full bloom. The days are longer, you know, the days are much longer, particularly, up in here in Scotland. Gosh, it doesn't get dark until 10:30 and sometimes 11 in the summer. So you've got these longer days. We're outdoors doing much. We're sociable. You know, we're eating different foods. We're going on holiday. You know, pleasure and joy just takes on a different element that it would maybe in the other seasons. Not to say that pleasure and joy aren't in the other seasons, but you know, it's just this, it's very vibrant, maybe is the right word. And you know, we just seem to be doing more. You know, I always use the analogy of, on a Sunday in the summer, I'm quite happy to be out probably on a Sunday afternoon, you know, early evening. But once it gets to October, November, I mean, I want to be home by 3 o'clock on a Sunday. I do not want to be out past then. You know, I really am hibernating. So it's looking at what are we doing, you know, activities in the summer will look different to what they may look like in the winter or in the other seasons.
So when we talk about how to manage stress, how do we use this knowledge of the seasons to manage stress through the summer? Is it about balancing the stresses with the playfulness outside, or does that make sense?
I think I've got two, my mind kind of goes two places. One, you know, we can't maintain that doing every day. Yeah, exactly. That full capacity. And that's why we're talking about this. You know, the world kind of wants us to be permanently in summer. We can't be. But equally, in summer, I really think about, you know, that enjoying that vibrance and that and that pleasure, and we can still invite in rest. You know, how does it look like in if we were talking about actually the season of summer? You know, how do you connect with yourself and enjoy those selves on an individual in an individual way and in a group way, in a mindful way? You know, if we're busy doing it all, we kind of would miss the summer. So I think there's something about taking a grounding yourself in nature.
Lovely. Yeah, nice one. Okay, and then we come to the moon. So the moon's important in this, isn't it? You've got the full moon and then the different.
Yeah, so the moon is another cycle that we can lean on. And look, some people have a real connection with the moon. Some people are like, yeah, I notice it. You know, some people listening might think, yeah, I've felt before where you feel a bit crazy and then you realize it's a full moon. And so the moon, yeah, you know, you hear that. And I did psychology at uni, and you know, there are links with, I did criminal psychology, and there's links with, you know, crime and the moon phase. And so it's interesting, all of these phenomenons that happen. But the moon, you know, builds to a full moon. So it builds, its energy is building to a full moon. And then we get to a full moon, and then the energy contracts, or the moon contracts to a new moon. And so we'll see that building moon and that contracting moon. And that does that over 28, 29 days. I think it's 29 and a half days, but people say it's 28 days. And so that's a cycle that we are a part of, you know, every day, this moon building. Exactly. And then you think about the tides as well, you know, the ocean's tides are linked to the moon phases as well. So it's very interesting. So, you know, the moon can impact our energy, or like I mentioned, some people might feel that connection to it, some people might not. But it's just another example that we can draw on about how, you know, we're not just the same. The moon is just not always full. The moon's energy, or the moon's size, or however you want to look at it, builds and contracts, just like nature builds and contracts.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about stress, are we saying here then that the full moon is the most likely? It's not that we don't get stressed any other time, but it's going to impact more people in a stressful way around the full moon. And if people do it.
Yeah, I would say that some people might notice they feel very energized, and that could be, you know, they could just feel quite frantic on a full moon. They might feel very drip, full of energy, frantic, driven. Some people might say I feel a bit high, and that equally can lead to that stress. Equally, on a new moon where it's like contracted, some people might notice that they feel a bit slower, that they feel a bit, you know, it's kind of, that's the moon's winter, that they're feeling a bit slower, a bit introverted, you know, a bit kind of wanting to slow down. And I think where that can lead to stress is that thinking there's something wrong with us. You know, there's something wrong with me. Why do I want to slow down?
Can that feel like low mood or not?
Yeah, I think it can. Yeah, of course. Yep.
So can that also then lead to, sorry, I'm like Spanish Inquisition, isn't it?
Fine.
Just trying to understand it. So can then that also lead to like more arguments, things like that, or not really?
No, you know, that's one of those things I felt I couldn't say, but this is it, where it depends on individuals and how they manage this with themselves. And I think this is where the link is, in that we feel like we should just be one way all the time. And so when it's something slightly different, we kind of almost don't know how to manage ourselves and meet ourselves in it. And then we can then, you know, project that onto others or onto our environment.
Yeah. So the other phases, so as the new moon then turns around to become the full moon, the phases in between, how are they related to stress, if at all?
Yeah, so there's the building energy of the moon. Some might refer that to as a waxing moon, as it goes from new moon, builds to a full moon. And again, that's like spring. building to summer.
Yeah.
And that's like the ages of, 0 building up to, maybe 50. So it's this building energy. And so some might feel, I don't know if it's stress, but they just might feel that building energy. They just might notice that rise in energy. And again, some people might think, oh, great, I feel really energized. And some people might feel like, oh, where's this energy coming from? And if they're sensitive, that can then lead to anxiety and stress in that respect. And then equally, as the moon contracts to the new moon, that's the slowing down. And that's kind of what I mentioned before, is that some people then might notice a pullback and think, oh, where is this coming from?
Yeah, okay. Right. And then so there's the phases of our day. So the morning through night. How does that impact our stress levels, would you say, if at all?
I think where it is just drawing on it, again, the day builds, contracts, and say it peaks around midday, 1 o'clock, and then it kind of, so it builds and then it contracts down into the evening. And so again, we can draw on the 24-hour cycle to show us that we're not going at the same rate at every hour of every day, and we apply that. And I think where it can be stressful as well is where we're trying to, this whole phrase that I know people are saying, well, maybe we got it a little bit wrong there, but there's 24 hours in a day. And it's a bit like, yeah, but those 24 hours are different hours. And if you're trying to perform at the same rate of every one of those hours, or every one of those 14, 16 hours that you're awake, 18 hours that you're awake, you're going to burn out.
Yeah, absolutely.
That pressure that we put on ourselves, that causes, I think, stress.
Yeah. And there's also the added complication of some people are naturally morning people. So I'm naturally a morning person. I'm so productive in the mornings. And then other people are the opposite. They're night owls. And to get started in the mornings is very difficult. So I guess that's about honoring your type, or can you become more one? Because I think, I don't know, I like being a morning person.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like honoring your natural rhythm, and it's learning to listen to it. And again, I guess rather than trying to be the same or what you think you should be, really cyclical awareness is about listening to yourself as well. And so it's like, yes, we have all these seasons and these cycles that we can draw on. However, your connection with yourself trumps anything. So I can draw on these cycles, but if I'm a nighttime person, I notice more of my spring new day energy starts for me around 10 o'clock. Whereas for you, it might start at 6 o'clock. So yeah, absolutely.
I'm terrible. Anyway, okay, so let's move on now to women and their natural cycles. So I work as a therapist and coach, and I notice a lot of women when it's their time of the month that they just really check, everything seems a lot worse for them, and they want to leave their partners suddenly. Arguments, and it just is so interesting. And then other people, that they don't experience that at all. So how can women who do experience that fluctuation, which is not, it doesn't mean they're horrible people, they just are affected, right? So how can they manage themselves through that in a way that produces a lot less stress and is a lot more kind to themselves?
I think first of all is for them to hear that it's very normal, and that this principle again, that we're not the same every day. So whereas the male hormone cycle is, so we all have melatonin and cortisol as part of our sleep-wake cycle, and then men have testosterone as their main sex hormone that really drives them, and that's a 24-hour cycle. It rises in the morning, peaks in the middle of the day, drops in the afternoon, and it does that across their life cycle. And yes, testosterone drops a bit in their later life, but it's pretty consistent over a 24-hour. Whereas the female hormonal cycle, when you're in your menstruating years, your hormonal patterns are different every day, because our three main hormones are, progesterone and estrogen in the first half, and the progesterone in the second half. And we do have testosterone around the time that we ovulate. So you might, the archetype cycle, 28 days, a healthy cycle is anywhere between 24, 25 and 35 days. But your cycle, so your hormones are doing something different every day of that. So a lot of women are putting pressure on themselves to be the same every day, to be in the season of summer every day, but they're just not. And just like I've gone through the seasons, building and then contracting, and the moon building and contracting, the female hormone cycle over the menstrual cycle builds to ovulation, and we forget about ovulation. It's like the pinnacle of the cycle, and then we contract to our menstruation, to our bleed. And that time just before our period, where that's when our hormones, we almost don't have any of those hormones left in our body. We've got nothing buffering us. So whereas at ovulation, whereas often where you hear women feel like, I am superwoman, if you're a parent, it's where you're like, I'm a great mum, I've got so much patience, what else can I give? If you don't have children and you run your own business, or you're a manager, that's when you're like, I've got this, I'm great. And then just before your bleed is when you're like, who hired me? I'm a fraud as a parent. All of these things that we're saying to us, like you say, that's it, I'm leaving my marriage and I'm moving to the other side of the world. And I think the layer is, and then we're shaming ourselves for feeling this way. But we've got no hormone. We've got very little hormones. We're not buffered by anything. We're very raw, and so one is bringing in that love and compassion for yourself and that knowledge, because I think first of all, that is really, really important. I would also say that a lot of these symptoms are very exacerbated because we're trying to go, and we're trying to push at the same rate that we were 2 weeks ago. And naturally, our bodies are asking us to slow down because we're about to bleed, we're about to go into our winter. And so there is something about learning to pace yourself throughout your cycle, but equally in that phase, if you're someone who really struggles with your premenstruum, would really invite you to slow down in that week. I'm not saying stop, but can you slow down a bit and bring in some boundaries? Can you get earlier nights? Can you bring in a bit of extra support? Can you be a little less social and really look after yourself and prioritize yourself that week?
Yeah. And that's an act of self-love, isn't it? It's not an act of weakness, because I think with our culture now, as you said, it's so we have to be doing all the time. We kind of applaud this achievement orientation, and this is why burnout and breakdowns are so much more prevalent. So it's an act of self-love and actually investment in your success to self-care. It's not an act of weakness. It's not an act of selfishness. It's actually an investment in doing things well.
Absolutely.
I think we need to really educate people that this is true, and this drive for people to socialize all the time. I think they think that they should.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's like, when do you get in touch with yourself? And what do you mean? So there's no, they're doing none of the winter stuff. They're doing none of all of the other clever things that you said. So it really is about connecting in a connection. Really understand what is the most nourishing thing that I can do for myself, so that I'm more there for others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I really love what you said there, because I think that is really what cyclical awareness is about. It's about each day being like, what's around for me today, and what is the most nourishing thing I can do for myself today, so that I can be there for, be in the world. And because it starts with you, and that might look very different one week compared to another, because one week it might be, I really want to get out and connect with other people. That's what's really important to me today, because if we were using the menstrual cycle, because I'm in that ovulation part of my cycle, and that's where I really am drawn to connect with people. And then there are going to be parts of your cycle where, do you know what the most nourishing thing today is? To put my phone on silent.
Yeah.
And not reply to all of the messages, that do they need to be replied to today?
Yeah.
No, they can wait.
I feel the need to say something here, which takes us slightly off track, but I'm just thinking of different people that might be listening. If somebody feels that they're having to withdraw every single day, or they don't want to socialize at all, or they want to socialize every day and they've got to, that's a different problem. This is not to do with cycles. That's something else that needs attention. So that aside, all this is really, you know, there might be depression and all kinds of stuff going in there, but those things aside, these are just nurturing, loving things to do. The wisdom is in nature, and we override it, which is not helpful, is it? And the things that you said about menstruation, sorry, Guy, actually men kind of are affected as well, because, you know, the women in their lives, you know, whatever orientation they are, there are women in men's lives, you know, and it affects them. So their knowledge of this is really important for their ability to manage stress, so that they don't take it personally when their partner, their mother, their sister or friend is suddenly wanting to kill them. So that's an exaggeration, although not entirely.
That's it. Well, this is it. It's like, what, you know, I've heard that from lots of men in my life who, when I've had these conversations, I've been like, I guess they've really appreciated that conversation, because they've taken it personally, because that one moment their partner or their mother or their sister is like, yes, I'm really interested in you. What can I do for you? And then all of a sudden they seem withdrawn. And they're thinking, why are they withdrawn? Is it something that I've done? And it's like, no, they're just naturally withdrawing and getting in touch with themselves. So absolutely, it's really relevant to them.
So briefly, I don't want this to be about the menopause, but since that is another cycle, let's briefly mention what do people need to know about that in terms of managing their stress, because I'd like to do a whole different podcast on this one,
on menopause. If we look at the cycles, and it's interesting that we really focus on the premenstruum of the menstrual cycle, which we relate to like the inner autumn, the outer seasons, the contracting. Menopause, so your premenstruum is almost like your training wheels for menopause, which is this I'm not interested in the outer world. You know, also this tension that we can feel in our premenstruum, like something needs to change. And this calling of like, I want to pack up and move to the other side of the world, is what often people will hear in that menopause. You know, that time of menopause, you're being asked to come back into yourself, reevaluate your life, and make more space for you now. And again, and that's hard in a world that, and as a woman where you're kind of this idealized view of a woman who just is giving and nurturing and a mother and looking after everyone else, and all of a sudden this life cycle is happening and saying, no, you need to pick you now, no, you need to slow down now. And so it's about slowing down. It's not about stopping. It's not about your life is over, but it is a transition phase of your life, and it is asking you to reevaluate and come into yourself. And so can you slow down, and slow down, not to stop, slow down so that you can hear what it is that needs to happen here. Who are you? What do you want? So they're the kind of the gifts of menopause, alongside the some of the very horrific physical things. But again, to deal with those, it is about really looking after yourself.
Let's briefly visit. So we've mentioned the ages 0 to 25, I think you called it, which is innocence, arrogance. I think you used the two of those.
Risk-taking, optimism,
and then the next phase is,
so there's 25 to 50 years. So we might liken them to the mother archetype, or like the father. You know, it's where we're creating. So that is related to creation. So it might be having a family. It might be having a business. You know, it might, you know, you're bringing something to the world. We're doing more. You know, think about that phase of our life. We're working, we're having families, we're out busy. Our lives are very full. We've got lots of responsibility. So it's a bit like the summer. When we're talking about the summer, it's just, there's a lot happening in the summer. So that's a life cycle of 25 to 50.
And then the 50 onwards would include the menopause, generally speaking.
The
same principles for men in terms of time for you, slow down.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
it's a bit like when people talk about, and maybe it's a bit of a generalization, but the male midlife crisis, how is that any
yeah,
different from when they're being asked to reevaluate? But when we're not given time to reevaluate, we can make knee-jerk reactions versus being invited to slow down. So 50 to 75, and being asked to slow down, like autumn, what it's a transition, slowing down, discernment, what's worked, what's going well, what's not, what's no longer serving me, is what's really coming through there. And really that discernment, I think, is really valuable. But again, we're a bit frightened of our own discernment, what might come through.
in terms of,
Well, I think those truths, where sometimes want to be agreeable and we don't want to be seen to rock the boat. And menopause, and equally for men in that life stage, and if we relate it to the premenstruum, rocks the boat. Sometimes we have some things that we want to say that maybe we don't want to hear, let alone other people want to hear.
I like to think of people of a certain age as well as this is the time to really savor what you've built, to savor life, rather than keep doing, taste it, be enjoying the moment. I'm doing some coaching with a guy who's a CEO, and he's had to stop because he had a stroke, and he feels so I want to use a word. I hope he never watches this. It feels impotent in life because he can't do what he did. I said, this is the time to savor what all of this that you've built. It's the time to savor. He's enjoying so many things that he's just had no time for now. It's just wonderful.
Absolutely.
It's time to enjoy.
And it's that harvest, like
exactly,
think about all things.
yeah.
This is your time to harvest what you've sown all these years. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of beautiful if you let it be. Rather than, so a lot of people, it's so interesting doing this work, because a lot of people say, but I used to be able to do that, and I used to be so good at this, and I used to do that, and I used to manage a big group of people, and now it's time to savor all of the fruits of your labors. It's time for you.
Yep. Absolutely.
And okay, so let's look at the female male energy thing, because people think, and we've mentioned testosterone, it is a male hormone, but women have it, and men have the female hormone. So we have a little bit, all of us, don't we? So it's about having the right balance. But there's also this concept of masculine energy and feminine energy, and people get really confused about what that really means. It's not about being more of a man or more of a woman. We could all do a bit with a bit of each, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So feminine energy, masculine energy have nothing to do with the gender, or your own gender. Yeah, they're not about masculinity or femininity. And the way I really like to conceptualize them or help people to understand them is in doing energy and being energy. And we need both to have a full and balanced life. And if we think about the world is almost like in the unhealthy masculine, because it's in the unhealthy doing. It's just constantly doing, and the world is burning out. And individuals are sort of tipping up too much into the masculine, which is too much into the doing, and therefore burning out. And so if we think about,
can I just interrupt? Sorry, I know this is rude, but there's a really important point. There's so much do. People are burning out, but the ones that stay doing are the ones that are really creating the toxicity of the world. So there needs to be, would you agree? We need some of that feminine energy to make the world less toxic.
Yes,
so it's so hard. So I just wanted to make that point.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I could go on, but I won't, because I was like, oh gosh.
Go on. How much time have we got? My God.
So so if you think about doing energy, so yes, it's like masculine energy, or go. There's a lady called Michaela Boehm who really taught me about that go and that flow. So it is logic, reason, it's linear, it's kind of force, it's drive. And we absolutely need all of those, right? Because we need to be moving forward. It's boundaries, you know, we need boundaries. So that's that kind of that masculine go doing energy. And we all know what it feels like to be doing. But when we swing to over and kind of into the unhealthy side, we lose the being energy, which is what some people refer to the feminine, or that flow, and it kind of lives in the shadow of the doing. Being energy is that being, and I've heard so many people say things like, I just want to learn how to be. And it's like, but how do I do that? And that involves rest. Our being energy involves pleasure, you know, and pleasure pleasure takes on so many things. You know, it's intuition, you know, trust, just that deeper knowing. It's connection, it's receiving, whereas the doing energy is about giving, being energy is about receiving. And our being energy really connects us to our body. You know, if we can't be in our body, and if we can't be in connected to ourselves, we can't kind of be in our life.
And actually saying being in our body, part of the work that you do is about embodiment, and part of the whole of this conversation is about embodiment as well, isn't it? So
yeah,
that is really important. So what we're saying, I guess, is that men need to have a bit more of this being. And I know so many women that are just doing.
Oh, absolutely.
So they need to honor their natural inclinations to be as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. What I hear a lot, you know, men have a lot of shame about the being energy. I'm not allowed. And I think what I hear from women, and it's not all women, but you know, some women say, I'm very terrified of my doing energy. My masculine really frightens me. And I feel like I'm ashamed of my being energy. I'm not allowed to. So yeah, this being energy. And what happens when we're stuck doing is that we bypass our bodies. You know, we bypass our needs, we bypass our signals, we bypass those sensations in our body that kind of tell us like, hey, now's the time to pull back, or actually now is the time to move forward and go a little bit harder, or now's the time for rest. Or so yeah, but we can't do that if we don't slow down and connect with our bodies and connect with our being energy.
Yeah, and our intuition around that as well, because you said intuition. This has been so incredibly interesting. I think there is so much in what you're saying here. Is there anything important? Because I don't want to overwhelm everyone. Have we covered everything?
I think this one little point back to the life cycles very, very quickly is that it doesn't matter where you are in your life cycle as well. You still have connection to the different cycles. So just because you and I aren't in our 0 to 25 age range doesn't mean that we don't have, you know, a young person within us that has
such a good point. Yeah.
You know,
this is really big actually for me, if I may share, because I think people will resonate. So I was always brought up to be the responsible one. And I had to connect with my inner child to just be playful. And I thought, oh, this is really, and so that's part of my stress management, is just doing things that are, you know, just fun. They don't have a purpose. Fun. And I think that's really important. And I think having children around is a really important part of that. Or my little dog here who's sleeping next to me. He's in his autumn. So it is important. I love that you said that, and being able to connect with the so it's not forcing it, it's like, oh, I need some more of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed it. I always at this point ask my guests if there's a book that they could recommend that they found really helpful, inspiring, useful. What book do you have in mind that you'd like to share with our audience?
I thought important to share the book that really started all of this work off for me, which was Wild Power by Alexandra Pope and Shani Hugo Willitzer. So that really brought me into this cyclical work. So yeah, that's a great place to start.
Brilliant, because it is quite a complicated, I feel like we've covered such a lot quickly. It's quite complicated and yet simple. Is that fair to say?
Oh gosh, yeah. I always say that to people. It's very simple, but at the same time, it's so deep. So yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's really a good recommendation. Thank you so much. I hope everybody has enjoyed this just as much as I have. Thank you so much, Lizzie. If you have enjoyed it and found it helpful, do please like and share. Actually, like and share anyway, because this might be helpful to somebody else, even if you haven't found it useful for you. I'm pretty sure that you will have. And subscribe also. And I wish you all the very best in whatever cycle in your day and your life that you're in. Thank you very much.